The air in the abandoned branch bank old safety deposit room hung heady, thick with the scent of dust and forgotten metal. My breath plumed faintly in the cool, subterranean chill. It was a peculiar place for my work, but the isolation suited me. The deep vaults a perfect, undisturbed sanctuary for the delicate fragments I often studied. Beneath the beam of my task lamp, a sliver of polished obsidian rested on a velvet cloth, a shard of a tool, perhaps, its edge still impossibly keen after millennia. I held it with forceps, my magnifying visor pressed close to my eye, tracing the microscopic striations. Each mark told a story, a history of pressure, impact, a specific hand. The world outside, with its incessant demands and fleeting concerns, felt light years away. Here time bent, and the dead whispered their truths. My phone, tucked into the breast pocket of my worn lab coat, vibrated with an insistent buzz, shattering the quiet. I carefully placed the obsidian back into its padded case before answering, my movements precise. Seth here, Professor Thorne. The voice on the other end was clipped, efficient, belonging to the lead detective I'd worked with on a particularly grisly case last year. Apologies for the interruption. We have a situation. Blackwood Manor. Dr. Alistair Finch. My grip tightened on the phone. Alistair Finch. The name resonated with a specific kind of academic gravitas. A celebrated historian, known for his controversial theories on pre-colonial artifacts and his fiercely guarded private collection. Blackwood Manor itself was a legend, an estate steeped in local lore, its sprawling grounds supposedly concealing ancient secrets. I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. What about him? Althea's apparent fall. Grand staircase. Early assessment points to an accident, but given his stature and the manor's history, the superintendent wants a thorough look. You're kind of thorough. Can you get here? I'm on my way, I said, already shedding my visor. The obsidian shard momentarily forgotten. An apparent fall was often anything but, especially when it involved someone like Finch. My work had taught me that gravity was rarely the sole culprit. The drive to Blackwood Manor was long, winding through forgotten country roads that narrowed as I ventured deeper into the estate's territory. Blackwood wasn't just old, it felt ancient, a place where the very stones seemed to hold grudges. When I finally reached the manor, its silhouette loomed against the bruised sky. A Gothic behemoth of gray stone and leaded glass. Emergency vehicles, their lights flashing silently, dotted the gravel drive, their modern presence an incongruous splash against the timeless backdrop. Crime scene tape, a garish yellow ribbon, crisscrossed the entrance. The detective, a man whose weary eyes missed nothing, met me at the grand double doors. He barely offered a nod, his attention already elsewhere. Thanks for coming, Seth. It's a mess. The local patrol officers were ready to close this out as a tragic misstep, and you weren't convinced? I asked, pulling on my examination gloves, the sterile latex a stark contrast to the historical weight of the manor. Call it a gut feeling, or maybe the sheer coincidence of Finch, of all people, taking a tumble down that staircase. He was meticulous, almost pathologically so. I followed him inside. The foyer was vast, dominated by the very staircase the detective mentioned. The air was frigid, despite the efforts of the forensic team already working the scene. A faint metallic tang hung in the air, a scent I knew intimately. Finch lay sprawled at the base of the staircase, a macabre tableau. His body was twisted at an unnatural angle, one arm flung out, his head resting against a polished marble floor. The initial responders had already done their work, but the body remained largely untouched, awaiting my assessment. I knelt, ignoring the hushed conversations of the other investigators. My gaze swept over the scene, absorbing every detail. The police photographer's flash momentarily illuminated the scene, then plunged it back into the dimness. My eyes, however, had already captured the image. Finch was dressed in tweed, a scholar's uniform. His spectacles lay shattered a few feet away, shards of glass gleaming like scattered diamonds. The detective was right. Finch was a meticulous man. Everything about his appearance, even in death, spoke of careful habits. But something felt off. I began my external examination, my fingers brushing lightly over his clothing. There was a tear in the elbow of his jacket, consistent with the fall, and scrapes on his exposed skin. But as I moved to his right hand, I paused. It wasn't organic matter. Then, my gaze caught on his right shoe. The heel was scuffed, certainly, but the sole itself had an odd, almost too clean abrasion. And more importantly, embedded firmly in the worn leather of the sole was a tiny, intricate silver filigree. It was a pattern I recognized, though I couldn't immediately place it. It was too ornate, too old, too out of place for a modern shoe. It didn't belong. My breath hitched. An accidental fall. I looked up at the towering staircase, then back at the faint, almost imperceptible scuff marks on the banister a few feet above Finch's head. The detective's gut feeling wasn't just a feeling. Something was very wrong here. This wasn't just a fall. This was a story waiting to be meticulously, painfully unraveled, and I was the only one who could read its ancient, silent script. I followed him inside. It spiraled upwards, a dark oak leviathan, its banisters intricately carved with grotesque gargoyles and trailing vines. The air was frigid, despite the efforts of the forensic team already working the scene, their breath misting faintly in the frigid atmosphere. My own senses sharpened, cutting through the chill. The detective, a man whose name I hadn't caught but whose weary eyes spoke volumes of long nights, pointed towards the base of the staircase. Doctor, then apparently a tragic slip. My gaze tracked his gesture. Dr. Finch's remains lay crumpled on the marble flooring, a still life of broken grace. A colleague in a sterile suit knelt beside the deceased, meticulously photographing, while another carefully bagged items of potential interest. I approached the perimeter, my boots silent on a cold stone. Initial assessment? I asked, keeping my voice low, a professional courtesy to the somber environment. The detective sighed, running a hand over his close-cropped hair. Looks like he lost his footing. Head trauma. Significant. The fall from this height he trailed off, gesturing vaguely up the imposing structure. And lettuce. The word hung in the air. Too neat, too final. I'd learned early in my career that things rarely fit perfectly without a little forcing. My eyes scanned the scene, not just the body, but the entire tableau. The polished marble floor showed no obvious scuff marks leading to the fall point. The heavy, velvet runner that usually adorned the stairs was bunched near the top, as if it had been disturbed, but not dragged. If he'd slipped, wouldn't there be some evidence of a struggle, a desperate grab? The banister, so ornately carved, offered plenty of purchase. I donned a fresh pair of gloves, then stepped under the tape, moving with deliberate slowness. My colleague glanced up, offering a nod of acknowledgement. I knelt beside Dr. Finch, my gaze sweeping over the remains. The prominent historian, now a testament to gravity's unforgiving nature. I began my meticulous external examination. I noted the angle of impact, the way his limbs were positioned. The detective's tragic slip narrative suggested a forward fall, perhaps tumbling down, but the way Dr. Finch lay, slightly twisted, almost as if he'd been thrown, felt off. I gently palpated the larger bone structures, feeling for gross dislocations or fractures. The skull, as the detective noted, bore the brunt of the impact, a devastating injury. Then I focused on the smaller details. I pulled out my magnifying loupe, its LED light illuminating the skin, revealing nuances invisible to the naked eye. I started with the hands, often telltale indicators. No defensive wounds, no obvious abrasions from trying to break a fall. Clean, too clean. And there, near the distal end of the left ulna, I saw it. A series of minute, almost hairline fractures, not the kind of broad, shattering breaks from a high-impact fall, but fine, intricate lines, almost like compression or torsion fractures. They were subtle, easily missed in the larger trauma. These weren't consistent with simply losing balance and falling forward. These were the kind of fractures I'd expect from a forceful twist or a sudden, sharp impact from the side. A type of stress not typically generated by an uncontrolled descent down a staircase. My brow furrowed. I photographed the fractures with my macro lens, capturing every minute detail. This was significant. It told a different story. Next, I turned my attention to his clothing. I used a fine brush to collect trace evidence from the fabric, particularly around the shoulders and back. My eyes, however, were drawn to something clinging to the tweed, tiny flecks that caught the floodlights at odd angles. They were minute, almost iridescent, with a faint, unusual reddish-brown hue. I carefully scraped a sample onto a sterile slide. Under the loupe, the flecks resolved into crystalline structures. They weren't common dust, not lint, not fabric fibers. This was mineral, and it was unlike anything I'd ever encountered in a domestic setting, or even from the local geology of this region. I knew the soil composition of this area intimately from past projects. This mineral was an anachronism. It had a unique, almost metallic shimmer, and its crystal habit was distinct. It spoke of ancient rock formations, perhaps even specific geological veins known only in remote, undisturbed locations. My mind raced. Microscopic bone fractures inconsistent with a simple fall. A unique mineral dust not native to this historic estate or its immediate surroundings. The detective's tragic slip was unraveling before my eyes. Finch hadn't just fallen. He had been subjected to force, and he had been somewhere else, somewhere remote, very recently. I carefully sealed the slide with the mineral dust, labeling it meticulously. Detective, I called out, my voice holding a new edge, a certainty that hadn't been there moments before. He turned, his gaze expectant. I think you're looking at more than a tragic fall here. He stepped closer, his expression shifting from weary resignation to cautious interest. What did you find, Doctor? Finch has specific fractures that suggest a struggle or a deliberate application of force, not just a tumble. And this? I held up the sealed slide. This is a unique mineral dust. It's not from this house. It's not from this region. It suggests suggests he was somewhere else, somewhere geologically distinct, perhaps very recently. The detective's eyes narrowed. Somewhere else? Nas, and I think that somewhere else is going to be key to understanding what truly happened here. I thought about the nature of the mineral, its ancient, almost primordial appearance. It sparked memory, a faint connection to obscure geological reports I'd once skimmed, concerning specific, rarely accessed locations. One particular location surfaced, a place known for its unusual geological formations and, coincidentally, its past life as a secure financial institution. Does that ring any bells? He paused, a flicker of surprise in his eyes, before reaching for his radio. My path had just taken a dangerous turn. I'd pushed for an expedited review, citing the unusual nature of the sample and the circumstances of Finch's death. The microscopic particles I'd meticulously collected from the estate's grand foyer, those anachronistic flecks clinging to the victim's clothing, were identified as a specific form of pyrophyllite. Pyrophyllite itself wasn't rare, but this particular isotopic signature, combined with trace elements of cinnabar and native gold, pointed to a very specific geological formation. A formation not found anywhere near the estate. My mind, a database of geological maps and archaeological records, instantly flagged a cluster of coordinates. A remote, almost forgotten stretch of the coastline, miles from any established roads, characterized by ancient volcanic activity and known for its unusual mineral deposits. It was also, I recalled with a jolt, an area Finch had mentioned once vaguely in a lecture about undocumented Roman trade routes. He dismissed it then as a speculative tangent, but the memory now felt like a spotlight. This wasn't just a random mineral, it was a geographical signature, a fingerprint leading directly to an unsanctioned archaeological dig site. Finch hadn't been merely theorizing about Roman trade routes. He'd been excavating one. The technician had confirmed the samples bore signs of recent fracturing, consistent with manual extraction. Someone had been digging. I spent the next few hours cross-referencing Finch's recent publications and grant proposals. Not that his official work was focused on medieval monastic land holdings. This coastal region, however, had been a whispered fascination of his for years, a pet theory he'd never pursued publicly. Until now, it seemed. My initial inquiries about Finch's research assistant, a young academic named Marcus, had been met with polite stonewalling. He'd left Finch's employ abruptly weeks ago, citing irreconcilable differences. Now I understood why. The drive was long, the paved roads giving way to gravel, then to little more than faint tracks winding through a landscape of gnarled cypress and salt-stunted pines. The air grew heady with the scent of brine and damp earth. I pulled my vehicle off the track, tucking it behind a cluster of dense scrub, and continued on foot. The ground underfoot was uneven, strewn with loose shale and the skeletal remains of ancient marine life. After a 30-minute trek, the trees thinned, revealing a crescent of secluded beach. Above it, carved into the cliff face, was the telltale sign of human intervention, a recently cleared access path leading to a shallow, open cut in the earth. The site was small, unassuming, but the disturbed soil, the glint of discarded tools, a rusty trowel, a cracked sieve told a clear story of recent, frantic activity. The exposed rock face within the cut glinted faintly, reflecting the overcast sky, a subtle sheen of the very pyrophyllite I'd analyzed. This was Finch's secret, but it was abandoned. No tents, no equipment of value, just the ghosts of hurried work. Someone had packed up in a hurry, or had been forced to. The chill wind carried the lonely cry of gulls. I knelt, carefully brushing away debris. It was a partial boot print, larger than Finch's own, and beside it a distinct, circular depression. The impression of a heavy, metal-rimmed barrel. Not archaeological equipment. Something else. The lead, though promising, felt frustratingly incomplete. Finch's assistant, Marcus, was the next logical step. My earlier attempts to reach him had been futile. Now, with a specific location and a clearer understanding of Finch's illicit activities, I tried again. This time, after several rings, he answered, his voice tight, laced with suspicion. I cut directly to the chase, mentioning the pyrophyllite and the unsanctioned dig site. The line went silent for a long moment. "Where are you?" I asked, my voice calm but firm, letting him know I wouldn't be put off. He stipulated a meeting time, late that evening, and warned me to come alone. The urgency in his tone was undeniable. He was scared. The building stood like a forgotten sentinel amidst crumbling storefronts, its windows boarded, its once grand facade defaced by graffiti. The heavy, reinforced door to the bank lobby was as though growling softly in the evening breeze. The air inside was thick with dust and the metallic tang of decay. My footsteps echoed unnervingly as I navigated the dim, cavernous space. The main vault, a colossal steel behemoth, stood open, its circular door peeled back like the skin of an ancient machine. Marcus sat hunched on an overturned filing cabinet, illuminated by the beam of a small, tactical flashlight. He looked nothing like the confident, eager young academic I remembered from Finch's seminars. I took a step closer, not threateningly, but to close the distance to make him feel the weight of my presence. What did Finch get himself into? He flinched, pulling the satchel tighter. He found something. Something old. Too old. He started changing. A blast. He wouldn't tell me everything, but he called it the lost artifact. Said it would rewrite history. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. He started meeting people. Not academics. Not collectors. Figures in expensive suits. Always in hushed tones. They met in places like this, off the grid. He became secretive, paranoid. He fired me because I asked too many questions. What kind of artifact? I pressed, my gaze fixed on his terrified face. Marcus shook his head vigorously, a desperate tremor running through him. He never showed it to me, just talked about its power, its significance. He said it wasn't just an object. It was a key to something forgotten, something they wanted to keep buried. His eyes widened further, fixing on a point beyond me, in the inky blackness of the bank's interior. He was so excited, so sure he was on the cusp of a major discovery. Then he just stopped contacting me, and now he's dead. A shudder ran through him. They're dangerous, sad. These people, they don't care about history, only about what they can control. He found something that threatened their control. He gestured vaguely with a trembling hand. He kept notes, fragments, said he stored them in places no one would think to look. Places that were. Finch was meticulous, paranoid. He wouldn't keep everything in one place. And the barrel impression at the dig site, a container for an artifact or something else? The pieces were beginning to fit, forming a picture far more sinister than a tragic fall. This wasn't just about illicit trade. It was about a hidden power, guarded by enigmatic figures who dealt in secrets, and I was increasingly sure, death. My path had just grown considerably more perilous. The wind whipped across the exposed plateau, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant pain. I pulled my jacket tighter, the chill doing little to dampen my resolve. The dig site, now cordoned off with flimsy yellow tape, looked stark under the overcast sky. This was where the historian had spent his final days, where he'd unearthed something significant enough to die for. Or, more accurately, to be killed for. I stepped over the tape, ignoring the glare from the uniformed officer stationed nearby. He shifted his weight, his hand hovering near his sidearm, but said nothing. He knew who I was, and he knew I wasn't leaving without a thorough look. The excavated trench yawned, a raw wound in the ancient soil. The barrel impression I'd noted in the initial reports was more defined now, a clear circular depression roughly a meter in diameter, undisturbed by the elements, almost too perfect. It wasn't the natural decay of an old barrel. It looked like something heavy and cylindrical had been placed there recently, then carefully removed. The edges of the impression were crisp, the soil within slightly compacted, not loose. I knelt, my gloved fingers sifting through the earth at the rim. The topsoil was a familiar dark loam, but beneath it, I found patches of a lighter, sandier clay. An anomaly. This wasn't local soil. It had been brought in, likely to cover something up. Fresh activity. The ground showed subtle signs of disturbance beyond the immediate trench. A scuff here, a fate boot pit, though partially obscured by the shifting dirt. Someone had been here, recently, and not for archaeological purposes. Then, my fingers brushed against something hard, small, and distinctly out of place. I extracted it carefully. Its surface was glazed, a deep, earthy red, adorned with a geometric pattern and a contrasting ochre. The design wasn't Roman, nor was it consistent with any known local indigenous craft. It felt ancient, yet the glaze technique was surprisingly refined. Anachronistic, just like the minute details on the historian's body. This wasn't just old. It was wrong. It didn't belong here, not in this stratum, not with this style. It was a piece of a puzzle I hadn't even known existed, a direct link to the illicit trade I suspected. I carefully placed the fragment in a sterile sample bag, my mind churning. What kind of artifact would this come from? And why was it here, now? A shadow fell over me. Seth. The local detective's voice was clipped, strained. We're being pressured to wrap this up. Coroner's report is in. Accidental fall. Open and shut. I stood turning to face him. His face was a mask of professional courtesy, but I saw the underlying tension, the weariness. He was a good man, but he was caught between a rock and a hard place. Accidental fall. Detective? With his skull fracture inconsistent with the impact point, and a shard of pottery that shouldn't even exist in this region found at the dig site, I held up the sample bag, the small fragment visible through the plastic. This isn't an accident. This is a cover-up. And this, I gestured to the circular impression, is where they moved whatever they found. He sighed, running a hand over his close-cropped hair. Look, Seth. I know you see things others don't, and I respect that. But the higher-ups, they want this closed. They're getting calls. Important people who want to keep whatever this historian discovered buried, I countered, my voice low but firm. This isn't just about a death, detective. It's about something far bigger, something they're willing to kill for. He just shook his head, a silent acknowledgement of the impossible situation. Just be careful, Seth. You're stirring up a hornet's nest. I didn't need his warning to know that. The pottery fragment felt hot in my hand, a silent accusation. I spent another hour at the site, meticulously documenting every detail, every nuance of the disturbed earth. The resistance from law enforcement was just another confirmation that I was on the right track. The more they pushed to close it, the harder I would dig. Later that evening, the tension that had been building all day finally broke. I returned to my lab, the familiar scent of chemicals and old paper a comforting presence. I unlocked the heavy steel door, the click echoing in the quiet hallway. Stepping inside, I immediately knew something was wrong. The air was different, cooler, a subtle draft I hadn't noticed before. Nothing was overtly out of place. My microscopes were where I'd left them, the specimen trays neatly stacked, but the stack of research papers on my desk was skewed, subtly shifted, as if someone had fanned through them too quickly. A drawer on my filing cabinet was a fraction of an inch ajar. My gut tightened. I moved slowly, methodically. Nothing was stolen. No equipment missing. No valuable samples disturbed. This wasn't a robbery. This was a message. A warning. Someone had been here. Someone had been in my lab. They hadn't taken anything because they weren't looking for valuables. They were looking for what I knew, what I had found, and they wanted me to know they'd been here. The implication hit me with the force of a physical blow. They knew I was onto them. They knew I wouldn't let this go. The historian's death, the anachronistic pottery, the pressure from law enforcement, and now this, it was all coalescing into a single terrifying truth. This conspiracy was far-reaching, far more dangerous than I had anticipated, and I was now firmly in its crosshairs. I was no longer just investigating a death. I was fighting for my own survival. Its weight, its texture, every detail I'd catalogued. The estate screamed ancient, yet my gut churned with a quiet unease. The resistance from the investigating officer, his dismissive tone, had only sharpened my resolve. I wasn't just on the right track. I was on a collision course with something deliberately obscured. I couldn't risk analyzing it at the local precinct, not with the watchful eyes of the officer and his colleagues. My usual lab was too far, too public. It was a relic from a forgotten economic downturn, its vault doors still functional, its main hall draped in dust sheets like ghosts. Inside, beneath the single, stark bulb I'd rigged, the silence was absolute. I laid the fragment on a clean cloth, setting up my portable microscope, UV light, and a small array of chemical testing kits. I leaned in, my breath a quiet whisper in the stillness. Under magnification, the familiar texture of fired clay resolved into a mosaic of mineral grains. The surface, pitted and worn, bore the characteristic signs of millennia of soil burial, mineral accretion, microscopic root etching, the subtle sheen of patination. I ran a cotton swab moistened with a mild solvent across a small, inconspicuous section. The grime lifted, revealing a deeper, richer hue beneath, consistent with the age I'd initially estimated. Then I switched on the UV light. Many ancient ceramics fluoresce in distinct patterns due to mineral content and burial conditions. This fragment did too, a soft, ethereal glow. It was too clean, too deliberate. I scraped a minute sample from the fracture line, barely visible to the naked eye, and subjected it to a quick microchemical test. The result wasn't what I expected from ancient clay. There was a binder, a synthetic polymer, present in trace amounts. A modern adhesive, expertly disguised, meticulously blended with ancient soil to mimic natural weathering. It wasn't used to repair a break. It was part of the original construction, a structural reinforcement integrated into the firing process itself. This wasn't a genuine artifact that had been damaged and mended. This was a creation, built from the ground up, with an eye towards durability and deception. A cold dread seeped into my bones, quickly replaced by a surge of adrenaline. This wasn't merely old. It was designed to look old, with an unparalleled level of sophistication. The mineral inclusions, the patination, even the microscopic wear patterns, all were meticulously engineered. Finch wasn't just researching ancient pottery. He was investigating a master artisan, a ghost in the machine of history. This wasn't a simple forgery ring trafficking in crude replicas. This was high art, high deception, capable of fooling even seasoned experts. The historian's death, initially dismissed as a tragic fall, now screamed murder, a silencing. Finch hadn't stumbled upon a dusty academic secret. He'd uncovered a well-oiled operation, trafficking in ghost artifacts, perhaps even rewriting history through their insidious craft. My understanding of the entire case shifted, twisting into something far more dangerous. The abandoned bank vault suddenly felt less secure, the silence more oppressive. I packed my gear, the fragment now a hot coal in my evidence kit. I needed to go back to the estate, back to Finch's study. If he was onto something this big, he wouldn't have kept all his secrets in the open. The estate, when I returned, felt different. I slipped past the perimeter, avoiding the solitary patrol vehicle that periodically circled the grounds. The study, where Finch had spent his final hours, still held the scent of old paper and dust. I moved with a renewed urgency, a predator scenting its prey. I started systematically, methodically. I checked behind every loose book on the towering shelves, tapped along the wainscoting, examined the underside of the heavy oak desk. Nothing. The study was a meticulously organized library, every item seeming to have its designated place. Too organized, perhaps. My gaze drifted to a large, ornate globe, its brass meridian tarnished with age. Finch had been a historian of global reach, and the globe sat prominently beside his reading chair. I spun it idly, my fingers tracing the faded outlines of ancient continents. As the globe spun past the date line, I noticed it, a barely perceptible click, almost swallowed by the creak of the old floorboards. I stopped the globe, spun it back, spun it again. Slowly. It came from the base. I knelt, examining the heavy wooden pedestal. There, hidden beneath a decorative brass plate, was a small, almost invisible button, flush with the wood grain. My finger hesitated for a fraction of a second, then pressed it. The air within was stale, undisturbed. I reached inside, my fingers brushing against several items. The first was a small, ruggedized hard drive, its indicator light a dull, lifeless red. Encrypted, I was sure. The second, tucked beneath it, was a rolled parchment, brittle with age. I pulled it out carefully. It wasn't parchment, not exactly. It was a modern print, made to look like aged parchment, with a complex, hand-drawn map covering its surface. But the map itself was an enigma. It depicted no recognizable geography. Instead, it was a lattice of symbols, ancient glyphs interwoven with what looked like coordinates, all converging on a central, unreadable cipher. A coded map, leading somewhere to something. The air in the study suddenly felt heavy, thick with unseen presences. Finch wasn't just exposing a forgery ring. He was exposing a network, a hidden legacy. And I, by finding his secret, had just stepped into the crosshairs. The pottery fragment had been a lie, a clue to a deeper deception. The map and the encrypted drive were the next pieces, pushing me further down a path I now knew was fraught with unseen dangers. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom, illuminating rows of empty safety deposit boxes, their doors gaping like silent, hungry mouths. The silence was profound, broken only by the hum of my laptop and the occasional creak of the old building settling. I'd chosen this place for its absolute isolation, a forgotten vault within a forgotten building, far from prying eyes and intrusive signals. The investigating officer's dismissive attitude still grated, but it had also solidified my resolve. I was on my own, and that suited me just fine. Spread across a makeshift table fashioned from an overturned crate and a discarded plank, the fragments of my investigation lay waiting. The high-resolution scans of the coded map, the encrypted files I'd painstakingly extracted from the historian's hidden drive, and the digital forensic images of the anachronistic pottery fragment. My decryption software, a custom suite I'd honed over years, glowed on the screen. A network of algorithms chewing through the data. Not GPS coordinates, not exactly, but a complex grid system I recognized as a variant of a 19th century military cipher, adapted with a unique substitution key. The historian had been a meticulous man, and this was his final, desperate message. Hours blurred. My fingers danced across the keyboard, entering variables, testing permutations. The coffee I'd brought had long since gone cold, its bitter taste a constant companion. Sweat pricked my forehead, not just from the stuffy air, but from the pressure building in my chest. Each failed attempt was a tiny defeat, each flicker of a potential match a surge of adrenaline. Then, a breakthrough. A sequence of symbols on the map, previously meaningless, snapped into place. Not individuals, but what appeared to be institutional designations. One, in particular, recurred to legacy. My focus shifted to the encrypted files. The map was a guide, but the files held the narrative. I'd identified several layers of encryption, a testament to the historian's paranoia, or perhaps his understanding of the danger he faced. The initial layers had fallen relatively quickly, revealing a jumble of seemingly innocuous financial records and academic drafts. But deeper down, protected by a sophisticated, custom-built algorithm, lay the real treasure. My software word, a low, rhythmic drone in the cavernous room. A progress bar inched forward. The tension in my shoulders was a physical ache. I remembered the historian's calm demeanor, his quiet intelligence, the unsettling stillness of his body at the base of the overlook. He knew something, and it had cost him everything. Finally, a cascade of green text scrolled down the screen, signaling success. My eyes devoured the information, moving from line to line, piecing together the disparate threads. The initial entries spoke of acquisition, appraisal, and transport, terms that usually applied to genuine artifacts, but the context shifted rapidly. These weren't just transactions, they were manipulations. The documents detailed a vast, interconnected network of wealthy collectors, influential academics, and shadowy historical societies. They weren't simply buying and selling, they were orchestrating. The legacy, the name I'd seen on the map, appeared frequently here, not as an object, but as a concept, a guiding principle. It referred to a specific historical narrative, one that seemed to diverge significantly from accepted truths. And then, the other term, the keepers. These were the architects, the custodians of this fabricated history, the silent hand guiding the flow of information and, more disturbingly, the flow of genuine, priceless artifacts. I scrolled through scanned images of ancient texts, digital copies of rare manuscripts, and detailed schematics of what looked like subterranean storage facilities. These weren't forgeries. These were authentic pieces, hidden, recontextualized, or simply removed from public knowledge. The conspiracy wasn't about creating false history through fakes. It was about controlling real history by controlling access to its physical manifestations. It was a planted anachronism, a deliberate misdirection to frame the narrative. This was far bigger than I'd imagined. The historian hadn't just stumbled upon a forgery ring. He'd uncovered an organization that reshaped the past to suit its own ends, an organization with the resources to operate across continents and through centuries. They didn't just trade artifacts, they traded in truth itself, but the financial records linked them to shell corporations and offshore accounts, flowing into and out of institutions I recognized as legitimate, respected entities. The web was intricate, almost invisible. I wasn't just investigating a murder anymore. I was peeling back layers of a hidden world, a world where history was a commodity, and those who controlled it held unimaginable power. The initial layers had fallen relatively quickly, revealing a journal entry describing a clandestine meeting with a former mentor, referred to only as the archivist, concerning the keepers and their vault of forgotten truths. A set of coordinates followed, along with the date years past, but a post-it note, scanned and appended digitally, updated the location to a more recent address, an abandoned branch bank on the city's outskirts. My fingers flew across the keyboard, cross-referencing names, dates, and locations. The historian had been meticulous, even in his fear. He left breadcrumbs, not for casual observers, but for someone with the patience and the forensic eye to follow them. The drive was long, taking me through forgotten industrial zones and then into a dilapidated commercial district. The abandoned branch bank stood like a skeletal monument to a bygone era, its windows dark, a layer of grime coating the brick facade. Rust stained the metal frames where the open sign once hung. I pushed open the heavy, gravity door, its hinges groaning in protest. Inside, the silence was absolute, broken only by the crunch of plaster dust under my boots. The main lobby was a cavernous space, stripped bare of tellers' stations and customer chairs. Only the immense, steel-reinforced vault at the back remained a formidable barrier of cold, gray metal. An old man emerged from the gloom, shuffling forward. He was frail, his frame stooped, his sparse white hair a halo against the dim light filtering through the grimy windows. He told you to come? His files did, I corrected, stepping closer. He left the trail. The historian. Are they real? He shuffled over to his small, rickety wooden table in the center of the room, brushing dust from its surface with a trembling hand. Real enough to make men disappear. Finch was too zealous, too close to the truth. What truth? I moved to stand opposite him, my posture deliberate, unyielding. I found specific mineral dust on the historian's remains, on his clothes, embedded in the fibers. It's unique, with a crystalline structure I've never encountered, and there were anachronistic details, minute but deliberate, at the scene. He wasn't alone. He was killed. The curator's eyes, which had been distant, snapped back to mine, wide with a mixture of fear and dawning recognition. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. The dust, tell me about it. I described the mineral dust, its unique crystalline structure, the trace elements I'd identified, a specific blend of silicates and rare earth metals, unlike anything found in the region of the estate. The old man's head snapped up. The Blackwood estate, he rasped, a tremor in his voice. It's the only place I know with that particular geological signature. They've been excavating there for decades, quietly, under the guise of restoration. It's their heart, Seth. The Blackwood estate, the very place where the historian had supposedly fallen. The anachronistic details at the scene, the mineral dust, the historian's encrypted files, and now, the archivist's confirmation. He spoke of the keepers then, his voice a dry rustle in the still air. Not a myth, he confirmed, but a network of powerful individuals drawn from old money and political influence, who believed certain historical narratives were too dangerous for public consumption. They controlled digs, manipulated discoveries, and erased inconvenient truths, all to maintain a specific version of history, one that benefited their continued power. The old man shook his head, a single tear tracing a path through the dust on his cheek. He never told me the full extent, something that would shatter their carefully constructed world. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "You must be careful, Seth. They will come for you too, if you dig any deeper." I didn't need his warning. The mineral dust wasn't just a clue. It was a geographical fingerprint, a direct link to the heart of their operation. My initial forensic analysis, which had merely suggested foul play, now pointed directly to a powerful, secret society. I had the confirmation I needed, and with it, a target. The Blackwood estate. The historian's fall was no accident. It was a message, and I had just received it. The warning from the contact had only solidified my resolve. The historian hadn't simply fallen. He'd been silenced, his work on the verge of exposing a truth hidden beneath the very ground where his life had ended. The mineral dust, the anachronistic detail on his clothes, wasn't just a clue anymore. It was a breadcrumb, leading directly to Elias Thorne and his clandestine operation. I had to follow it, no matter the risk. My first stop wasn't Thorne's sprawling estate. It was a derelict structure on the city's forgotten fringe, its brick facade crumbling, windows shattered like vacant eyes. I slipped through a gaping hole in the chain-link fence, the rusty wire scraping against my jacket. The air hung heavy with the scent of mildew and decay. The vault door, a formidable steel behemoth, stood ajar, its intricate locking mechanism long since bypassed. Inside, the safety deposit boxes had been ripped from their mounts, scattered like fallen dominoes. Most were empty, their contents plundered years ago, but I knew where to look. Following the cryptic instructions I'd received, I found a loose panel behind a remaining stack of boxes, tucked away in a corner. My fingers fumbled for the catch, a tiny, almost invisible button. It clicked, and a small, shallow compartment swung open. Inside, nestled in a velvet pouch, was a micro drive and a set of schematics for Thorne's estate. My contact had been thorough. The drive, I suspected, held encrypted data that the historian had managed to squirrel away. The silence of the abandoned bank pressed in, a silent testament to secrets kept and then forgotten. I didn't linger. The drive to Thorne's estate was long, winding through forgotten back roads that eventually dissolved into a private, gravel track. Trees, ancient and gnarled, formed a dense canopy overhead, swallowing the last vestiges of daylight. Thorne had chosen his isolation well. The estate itself emerged from the encroaching twilight like a fortress, its stone walls and imposing gatehouse hinting at a legacy stretching back centuries, yet updated with modern, almost invisible security measures. Infrared cameras peered from the eaves, laser grids hummed silently across approaches, and ground sensors likely waited beneath the manicured lawns. My pack was light, containing only the essentials: lock picks, a thermal imager, a multi-tool, and a small, high-powered flashlight with various filters. Every step was calculated, every rustle of leaves analyzed. I bypassed the perimeter fence with a practiced ease, disabling a pressure sensor with a small, specialized device. The air was cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant pain. My target was the West Wing, a newer addition that, according to the schematics, housed Thorne's private collection and, more importantly, his hidden workrooms. The building's architectural lines were a blend of old-world grandeur and contemporary efficiency. I found a service entrance, cleverly disguised as a part of the stone wall, and set to work. The lock was a digital marvel, but I had studied its schematics. Minutes later, with a soft click, the heavy door swung inward. The interior was silent, hushed by thick carpets and heavy drapes. I navigated the labyrinthine corridors, guided by the estate plans now etched in my mind. The air here was different, cleaner, with a faint, metallic tang. I found the passage, disguised as a linen closet, and activated the hidden mechanism. A section of the wall slid away, revealing a narrow, unlit corridor. This was it. The corridor led to a large, brightly lit chamber, the forgery workshop. It was state-of-the-art, a laboratory disguised as an artist's studio. UV lamps hung from the ceiling, illuminating workbenches laden with sophisticated microscopes, chemical reagents, and precision tools. Half-finished artifacts lay scattered across the surfaces. A Roman coin, its patina meticulously aged. A Sumerian tablet, its cuneiform script painstakingly etched. An Egyptian funerary mask, its gold leaf gleaming under the harsh light, yet subtly wrong. I picked up a small brush, still stiff with mineral residue, the same type of dust I'd found on the historian's clothes. The keepers weren't just collecting, they were creating. The scale of the operation was staggering, hinting at a vast, illicit network. My gaze swept across the room, searching for the next piece of the puzzle. The schematics indicated a sub-level, a vault. I spotted a subtle seam in the floor beneath a heavy, industrial-grade workbench. The air in the vault below was cool and dry, conditioned to preserve its contents. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom, revealing rows of custom-built, climate-controlled display cases. This wasn't a collection, it was a treasure trove. Maya's wedding taking in the impassable display. Here were genuine artifacts, priceless beyond measure, Bronze Age weaponry, gleaming with the patina of millennia, exquisite pre-Columbian gold figurines, perfectly preserved scrolls, their ancient script still legible, and a sarcophagus fragment, its hieroglyphs identical to those described in a historian's notes, the very ones he believed were proof of Thorne's illicit dealings. These weren't forgeries, these were the real thing, plundered from archaeological sites across the globe, kept hidden from the world. A sharp, high-pitched ping echoed through the vault, followed by the distant whir of machinery. A red light, small and insistent, began to flash near the entrance to the ladder shaft. Security had been triggered. I had been detected. Heavy footsteps thudded down the corridor I'd just traversed. I was trapped. My gaze darted around the workshop. There was a ventilation shaft, narrow but potentially passable, high above a workbench. No time for finesse. I grabbed a stool, then a stack of crates, creating a makeshift ladder. The shaft cover was bolted, but my multi-tool made short work of it. I squeezed inside, the metal scraping against my clothes, just as the service entrance door burst open, revealing the silhouette of a large, armed figure. I heard the click of a safety being disengaged. I crawled through the narrow ductwork, pushing past the stale air and the smell of dust, the sounds of shouting and searching growing louder behind me. The keepers had found me, but I had found their truth. The microdrive was still in my pocket, the images of the forgery workshop and the stolen artifacts burned into my memory. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I had chosen this place for its isolation, its forgotten corners, and the thick, sound-dampening walls that offered a fragile sense of security. The warning from the contact had seared itself into my mind. They know you're close. Finch hadn't just fallen, he'd been silenced, his work on the precipice of exposing a truth buried deeper than any archaeological dig. My makeshift workspace was a folding table salvaged from a nearby construction site, now littered with evidence bags, an array of specialized tools, and my laptop. On the screen, high-resolution photographs of Finch's final resting place blurred into images of Thorne's meticulously curated estate. My fingers, stained with forensic powder and a thin film of grit, flew across the keyboard, cross-referencing data, zooming in on microscopic details that would escape any casual observer. The mineral dust, that was the linchpin. I'd collected it from Finch's clothing, from the crevices of the stone balustrade where he'd supposedly fallen, and, crucially, from boot prints found near a discreet, recently disturbed patch of ground on Thorne's property. My initial analysis had indicated a rare crystalline silicate, but further, more focused examination under the portable microscope had revealed something more specific. This wasn't just a geological anomaly. It was a distinctive form of petrified wood, a species known only to exist in a single ancient geological stratum, one I'd encountered before in fragments associated with undocumented artifacts. Artifacts rumored to be part of the Keeper's collection, the very legacy Finch had been chasing. I pulled up a comparison image, a digital scan of a sliver of petrified wood I documented years ago from an unverified private collection, its crystalline structure unique. The match was undeniable. My gaze darted to a small, sealed bag containing a sample from Thorne's estate, from a newly excavated section Thorne had claimed was merely for a landscaping project. The lie now felt like a punch to the gut. The petrified wood dust wasn't just on Thorne's property. It was being disturbed there. Then there was the amber. Microscopic fragments, almost invisible to the naked eye, had been meticulously extracted from Finch's clothes, caught in the weave of his tweed jacket. I'd found similar specks in the soil samples from Thorne's estate, specifically from that landscaping site, but the real connection solidified when I remembered an older set of photographs from Finch's research notes, images of ancient amulets and carvings he'd been studying. One particular amulet, described in his notes as being made of unusual dark amber, had a distinct inclusion, a preserved insect, long extinct in this region, its delicate wings spread as if in flight. I zoomed in on my own photos of the amber fragments from Finch's jacket. Under extreme magnification, one tiny piece revealed a minuscule, unmistakable imprint of a wing vein pattern identical to the insect captured within the amber of the amulet Finch had photographed. The implications crashed over me like a wave. This wasn't just any amber. It was amber from those artifacts, and fragments of it were found on Finch and on Thorne's disturbed ground. Finch must have gotten too close, perhaps even visited Thorne's property, uncovering the illicit operation. The weight of the truth pressed down on me, heavy and undeniable. I'd had it. The connections were irrefutable. The unique petrified wood dust, linking Thorne's property to the Keeper's artifacts, and the specific amber, a direct physical link between Finch, Thorne's excavation site, and the very items at the heart of the conspiracy. I began to compile my findings, meticulously labeling each photograph, each data point, each chemical analysis result. The case needed to be airtight, an unassailable fortress of forensic evidence. I knew I was about to walk into a hornet's nest. The police force my contact had hinted was not entirely untainted. Presenting this evidence would not just expose Thorne, it would expose the network that allowed such illicit trade to flourish, a network woven into the very fabric of power. My life was no longer just at risk, it was a pawn in a much larger game. I copied the entire dossier to an encrypted drive, then to a backup, and a third, hidden one. There would be no erasing this. I closed my laptop, the screen reflecting my determined, grim face. The time for hiding was over. The time for exposing the truth had arrived. My fingers, smudged with fine grit, worked quickly, methodically. The tip from the estate groundskeeper about Dr. Finch's secret habit of stashing personal research in obscure, forgotten places had led me here. It was a long shot, but Dr. Finch had always been thorough, almost to a fault. One particular box, number 417, seemed to have been tampered with, its lock mechanism slightly gouged, but not broken. Someone had tried to get in, or perhaps had gotten in and then tried to obscure their tracks. With a delicate click, I opened it. Inside, nestled beneath a layer of yellowed tissue paper, wasn't cash or jewels, but a meticulously organized collection of documents. Not just research notes, but a small, leather-bound ledger, its pages filled with elegant, precise script, and a single, tarnished bronze key. The ledger was a financial record, but not of typical banking. It detailed transactions, dates, and coded names, all linked to significant sums. What caught my eye was the frequency of entries corresponding to the dates Dr. Finch had made his most prominent archaeological discoveries, and the dates of specific keepers' auctions I'd found in my earlier research. One name, consistently appearing next to the largest payouts, was a series of initials, TH. The bronze key was more intriguing. Its design was ancient, unlike any modern lock. I remembered this small, ornate chest I'd seen in Thorne's study during my initial visit to the estate, tucked almost out of sight. A chest that had felt wrong, anachronistic, just like the details of Dr. Finch's death. My mind raced. This wasn't just proof of illicit trade. It was a motive, laid bare. Dr. Finch had clearly been documenting the keeper's operation, perhaps even attempting to expose them from the inside. Thorne must have realized the fall from the parapet wasn't an accident, it was a silencing. I closed the ledger, the weight of the evidence pressing down on me. I had to confront him. A public exposition felt too slow, too prone to obfuscation. Thorne was a man of influence. He could bury evidence, discredit me. I needed to corner him, to watch him unravel, and to force a confession, or at least a reaction that would confirm everything. I secured the ledger and the key, tucking them into a waterproof pouch in my field bag. My phone buzzed, a message from the detective checking in. I typed a quick reply, vague but reassuring. I would tell him everything, but after I had secured the final pieces myself. This was my responsibility. The drive back to Thorne's estate felt different. The manicured lawns, the imposing stone walls, the ancient oaks, they no longer spoke of history and grandeur, but of secrets and blood. The sky was darkening, a bruised purple bruised against the horizon, mirroring the tension gnawing in my stomach. I parked my rental car discreetly down the lane, out of sight of the main gates. Walking the final stretch, the gravel crunched under my boots, each step deliberate. I had called Thorne an hour ago, feigning a discovery related to the estate's structural integrity, something I needed his immediate input on. His voice had been cordial, perhaps a little too eager. He was expecting me. The massive oak door of the manor stood ajar, a silent invitation. A shiver traced my spine, but I pushed it down. This was it. Footsteps sounded from the study. Thorne emerged, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, a thin smile on his lips. Prompt as ever. What urgent structural matter brings you here at this hour? His eyes, though smiling, were cold, appraising. I didn't return the smile. It's not the structure, Thorne. It's the foundation. I reached into my bag, pulling out the ledger. More specifically, the rotten foundation your keeper's operation is built upon. Thorne's smile vanished. His grip tightened on the glass, knuckles whitening. I have no idea what you're talking about. His voice was low, controlled, but I saw the flicker of panic in his eyes. Don't you? I opened the ledger to a specific page, detailing a transaction from the week Dr. Finch died. This ledger, Thorne, from Dr. Finch's private collection. It meticulously details the illicit trade of artifacts, the keeper's network, and your involvement. Each entry a thread in a tapestry of greed. You're dabbling in things you don't understand. I understand murder, Thorne, I stated, my voice steady, though my heart hammered against my ribs. I understand the microfractures on Dr. Finch's bones, inconsistent with a simple fall. I understand the specific metallic residue on his clothing, not from the parapet, but from a struggle. An idealist. He threatened everything. The words were hissed, a confession masquerading as an accusation. He was going to expose us, undo decades of careful work. He left me no choice. My breath hitched. He admitted it. Decades of work. So the Keepers isn't just about profit, is it? It's about preserving a legacy, a forgotten history you deem worthy of controlling, even if it means destroying lives. Thorne took a step forward, his eyes burning with a dangerous light. Some histories are too potent for the uninitiated, sir. Too dangerous. We protect them and ourselves. He moved with surprising speed for a man his age, grabbing a heavy bronze letter opener from a nearby desk. The ornate handle glinted in the dim light. You should have stayed with your bones, Professor. The foyer was vast, but the exits were few. Thorne was blocking the main door. My mind raced, assessing the distance to the nearest window, the strength of the door, the objects around me. My forensic training had taught me to observe, to analyze, to predict. Now, it was about survival. You won't get away with this, Thorne, I said, my voice firm despite the adrenaline coursing through me. The evidence is out there. It's recorded. It's coming. I bluffed, hoping to buy time, to make him hesitate. Thorne scoffed, advancing. No one believes a lone anthropologist over a respected historian. Especially not when that anthropologist has a convenient accident on my estate. He lunged. I sidestepped, the letter opener whistling past my ear. I wasn't trained for combat, but I was agile, and I knew how to read movement, how to anticipate trajectory. My eyes scanned the room, searching for an advantage, a weapon, anything. My gaze landed on a heavy, antique pedestal supporting a large ceramic vase. It was heavy, but perhaps unstable. A desperate idea sparked. I feigned a retreat toward the main door, drawing Thorne further into the center of the foyer. He followed, his movements predatory. As he closed in, I suddenly pivoted, not toward the door, but toward the pedestal. With all my strength, I shoved it. The vase teetered, then crashed to the marble floor with a deafening shatter, fragments scattering like shrapnel. Thorne flinched, momentarily distracted by the noise and the flying debris. It was a small window, but it was enough. I saw his opening a momentary imbalance and seized it. The heavy, antique pedestal support, a forgotten relic from the bank's grander days, was surprisingly light in my hands. I swung it, not with brute force, but with calculated precision, aiming for the attacker's shoulder. My adversary, Thorne's enforcer, stumbled back, clutching his arm, his face contorted in a mix of surprise and pain. I didn't hesitate. I pressed the advantage, shoving him hard against a row of corroded, empty teller cages. The impact echoed through the cavernous space. He slumped, momentarily incapacitated. My lungs burned, and the metallic tang of adrenaline coated my tongue. I wasn't a fighter, but desperation lent a certain clarity. Mayaz darted around the oppressive room. The air hung heavy with the smell of damp concrete, decay, and something else, a faint, almost imperceptible scent of old paper and something metallic, like stale iron. This wasn't just an abandoned bank, it was a tomb of forgotten secrets. The main vault door, a behemoth of riveted steel and intricate locking mechanisms, stood ajar. It was a dark maw, beckoning. The enforcer's presence here, the desperate attack, confirmed my suspicion. Thorne wasn't just hiding something. He was guarding it with lethal intent. I stepped inside the vault. Rows upon rows of safety deposit boxes, many of them forced open, lined the walls. A few lay scattered on the floor, their contents spilled. Old deeds, tarnished jewelry, worthless trinkets. But in the center, on a crudely constructed wooden table, sat a collection that made my breath catch. Ancient pottery shards, meticulously reassembled into elegant vases. Bronze tools, their edges still sharp despite millennia. Intricate gold leaf fragments, glowing dully in the gloom. And then, the scrolls, rolled papyrus, preserved in airtight cylinders, their faded hieroglyphs hinting at forgotten narratives. These were the artifacts, the very pieces I'd traced from the historian's estate, the ones the keepers had systematically plundered and concealed. A faint clatter from outside the vault brought me back to the present. Footsteps, more than one. My hand instinctively went to the heavy pedestal support I still clutched, but then I heard voices, not the guttural threats of Thorne's men, but the clipped, authoritative tones of law enforcement. I'd made the anonymous call from a burner phone an hour ago, feeding them just enough information to pique their interest, to lead them here without revealing everything I knew. "Duh, are you in here?" A voice echoed, belonging to the lead detective, a pragmatic woman I'd worked with before. "In the vault." I called back, my voice hoarse. She appeared in the vault entrance, her expression shifting from cautious vigilance to stunned disbelief as her flashlight beams swept across the recovered treasures. Behind her, other officers fan out, securing the room, their initial tension giving way to a shared sense of awe. They found Thorne's enforcer, still dazed, and within minutes, Thorne himself was apprehended trying to flee from a hidden exit in the building's basement. His network, his carefully constructed illusion of legitimacy, had finally collapsed. Forensic teams meticulously documented every artifact, every detail of the scene. I stood by a grimy window watching the last of the evidence vans pull away. The lead detective approached, a rare, almost imperceptible nod of respect on his face. "You did good, Seth." The weight of it all pressed down on me. The historian's life, the centuries of deceit, the deliberate suppression of knowledge. Justice had been served, yes, but at what cost? The emotional toll was immense. The world wasn't just bones and artifacts. It was a complex tapestry of human ambition, deception, and the relentless struggle for truth. The air outside was cool, crisp, carrying the scent of impending rain. I knew I couldn't go back to the sterile comfort of academic research, not after this. The pursuit of justice, the exposure of hidden legacies, the dangerous dance with those who sought to bury the truth. That was my path now. I looked back at the old bank building, its secrets now exposed to the harsh light of day. A new chapter had begun, not just for the world of history, but for me.